Imagine being trapped, not for a day or even a week, but for so long that the world you once knew feels like a foreign country. This is the unbelievable story of a man who made his home in the one place everyone else is trying to escape.
For 18 years, that's how long one man lived inside an airport terminal. His entire world was just the sound of rolling suitcases and final boarding calls.
He eventually got out. He had money. He had his freedom. But in a final heartbreaking twist, he chose to go back to the only home he really knew. And it was there, in the cold, echoing halls of the terminal, that his story came to an end.
That's the question, right? How does a person become a permanent resident of nowhere? We're going to unravel this entire incredible story. And hey, if you find stories that completely mess with your view of the world as fascinating as I do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Now, let's figure out how one man's life became a boarding pass to a place he could never leave.
Okay, so our story begins not on a plane, but in this strange, frozen-in-time reality of Terminal 1 at Paris's Charles de Gaulle Airport. For a man named Mehran Karimi Nasseri, this wasn't just a layover, this was his life. His entire universe was Terminal 1. His home was a simple red plastic bench. Everything he owned was piled high in airport luggage carts. Books, old newspapers, and this huge diary he was constantly writing in, just documenting his days. The airport staff all knew him, not by his real name, but as Sir Alfred, a name he would eventually take for himself. He just became part of the scenery, like a ghost in the giant machine of global travel. So how did he get stuck there in the first place? Well, it wasn't a choice, not at the beginning anyway. It was a total bureaucratic nightmare, just a perfect storm of lost documents and impossible legal loopholes. It all started when he was kicked out of his home country, Iran. He managed to get official refugee status in Belgium, which gave him a legal identity. But then, in 1988, on his way to the UK, he says his papers were stolen in Paris. Without those papers, he couldn't get into Britain, and he couldn't prove who he was to go anywhere else. And then a French court delivered the final, absolutely absurd verdict. Because he entered the airport legally, they couldn't kick him out. But without papers, he couldn't legally enter France either. He was completely, utterly trapped. He had officially become stateless, a person without a country. He existed, right? He was physically there, but according to the law, he didn't belong anywhere on Earth. And this legal black hole, it became his physical prison. But this is where the story takes a sharp turn. Because after years and years of fighting this, the doors to his prison were finally opened. The problem was, he didn't want to leave anymore. After his story got a lot of media attention, solutions started popping up. Belgium, the country that first gave him his refugee status, offered to take him back. A few years after that, France offered him official residency papers. He finally had a way out. He said no to both offers. After all that time fighting to get papers, he refused to sign them. And his reason? It's just astonishing. The documents listed his name as Mehran Karimi Nasseri and said he was born in Iran. But after so many years alone in that terminal, he just didn't identify as that person anymore. He'd created a whole new identity for himself, and he refused to accept any piece of paper that said otherwise. He started calling himself Sir Alfred Mehran. So where did that name come from? Apparently he got a letter from the British authorities one time that was addressed to him as Dear Sir Alfred, and that was it. That was enough for him. The name stuck, and Sir Alfred was born. In his mind, Mehran Karimi Nasseri, the Iranian refugee, was gone forever. The airport's chief medical officer, a guy named Dr. Philippe Bargan, who saw him all the time, he put it pretty bluntly. The legal trap was gone, the new prison was in his mind. Nasseri had built a nest. He was safe there. The outside world had become the real threat. You know, this one man's bizarre, personal tragedy, it didn't just happen in a bubble. His case became this chilling, real-world example of a global problem that lawmakers are still trying to figure out today. In fact, his story echoed all the way to the British Parliament. Yep, in 2014, during a debate in the House of Lords about immigration law, his case was brought up as a major cautionary tale. A speaker there warned that new laws could accidentally create more people just like Nasseri, even referencing the Tom Hanks movie his life inspired. They called statelessness an evil, and Sir Alfred became its human face, a symbol of what happens when a person is just erased by paperwork. Because when the state says you don't exist, it's not just a legal problem. It's an attack on your identity, your history, your very sense of who you are. But the story doesn't end there. Hollywood came knocking, which gave Nasseri the fame and the money that should have been his ticket to a brand new life. But his story,
it was destined for a much different, more tragic ending.
Steven Spielberg's company, DreamWorks, bought the rights to his life story for the film The Terminal. Reports say Nasseri was paid somewhere around $250,000. All of a sudden, the man on the red bench had money, fame, and a clear path out. In 2006, he was finally hospitalized, leaving the airport for the first time in 18 years. He spent the next few years in hotels and homeless shelters. He was free, but that freedom, it didn't stick. In the final weeks of his life, he made a choice. He went back.
On November 12, 2022, Mehran Karimi Nasseri, the man also known as Sir Alfred, died of a heart attack. He wasn't in a shelter or a hospital, he was in Terminal 2F of the Charles de Gaulle Airport, the place he had chosen to be his final home.
So why? After everything, why go back? Well, this quote from an interview back in 2003 might be the key. When a journalist asked him if he was angry about his situation, he said no. His real quest, the thing driving him, was to find out who his parents were. This all started from a family secret he'd been told, that his real mother was actually a Scottish nurse. His whole ordeal began as a journey to find her, to find his true self.
And that really brings us to the absolute core of his story. When he lost his home, his country, and his name on a piece of paper, he basically lost himself. So he spent the rest of his life trying to build a new identity on that red bench. Which leaves us with this final, haunting question. What is an identity if you have no place to call home? Let me know what you think in the comments.